In hindsight, 2014 was a year of big change for Kantai Collection. Not just because it was the year likely you and over 1 million others actually started playing, but also because this was the year the game featured far more updates to its mechanics and characters than the previous year in which it launched. In the developers' stalwart attempts to make the game balanced and fun, KanColle has seen many changes, from the fixing of bugs, to new maps, to granting our girls brand new capabilities. But could all of these updates be considered improvements? With big updates implemented every 2 weeks, give or take, there are going to be some mistakes. Not just in a programming sense, but also possibly in judgment. It's inescapable, really. And while these mistakes are almost always forgivable, since you and I had to settle for them, it is my belief that they should at least be recognized right alongside the good before their impact becomes generally unrecognized by the next batch of new players in 2015. So, it's time for some belated New Year's cleansing of the soul! These are what I consider to be, side by side, the top 5 best and the top 5 worst updates to Kantai Collection in 2014. First comes the worst. At the number 5 worst update, I'm cheating early and instead placing an issue that has plagued every major event throughout the year: holding off on Shinano. In the earliest days of KanColle, events such as the 2013 summer event and the 2013 fall event yielded Yamato and Musashi respectively, 2 ships that made the player feel justly rewarded for completing the hardest maps of their corresponding events. But when 2014 hit, winter event, a submarine. Spring event, a light cruiser. Summer event, a Kagero-class destroyer. Fall event, another Kagero-class destroyer. Shinano has become a running joke in the fandom because of her lack of appearance, while her 2 Yamato-class sisters have been getting the limelight in firepower for over a year now as of this video, with no hints of her being released anytime soon by the developers. My guess is that they realized they threw their best cards in too early and have been trying to awkwardly compensate ever since, but at this point, who knows? Second is the best. With the number 5 best update, I've placed Akashi's Improvement Factory. Personally, my own most unexpected update of the year when it was announced. It makes perfect sense, and I should have seen it coming. As mentioned in my previous Top 15 Favorites Addendum video, through the new feature of the Improvement Arsenal, or whatever the heck you want to call it, I like to call it the room where Akashi makes cutie faces at Admiral, she now has even more to do in-game besides heal your ships and administer the shop. She can upgrade your weapons for twice or 3 times the usual alien exploding fun. Not only does a legitimately useful feature get implemented, but Akashi also gets to become more useful and a valued part of any Admiral's team. Naturally, I approve of everything this update stands for, even if the materials required to make it work are a little tricky to acquire at the moment. Oh, hey! That's a good idea for an update! Moving on to number 4 worst, no new art for Zwei remodels. Technically, this one isn't cheating, because the Zwei remodels, essentially Chinese for the German ships, weren't implemented into the game until a couple updates after their initial release. And let me just say, wow, devs. Way to kill any suspense I had at the time with these after announcing them by not having them change whatsoever! I respect the idea that Fumikane, the man who drew Bismarck and Posse, is probably a busy guy. But I know for a fact that the one thing I myself and many, many other players look forward to most when a new Kaini is announced, heck, the thing that the devs tease us with most during any update involving a Kaini being released, is the brand new artwork for the lucky girl who's getting it. Add on the fact that these Zwei forms came out so relatively quickly upon the Germans' introduction into the game, and you've got a follow-up update to such a previously fantastic one that only feels rushed, slapped on, and tactless. If Bismarck Dry hadn't come out later to act as a big old band-aid to this issue, I'd have considered this lazy on top of everything else. However, at number 4 best, the recon plane bonus for shelling. It's like a Kaini for air superiority. Previously, having air superiority didn't really mean a whole lot in-game. It essentially just meant that whoever won it had some pretty hardcore planes. But ever since this additional mechanic, this greatly raised the stakes for having air superiority. If you win, any ship girl who's carrying a recon plane can get a bonus that allows them to do all around better at shooting down enemy vessels. But if the Abyssals win, they receive that potential bonus for shelling instead. This update encourages players to think about their stocked planes and allows previously dangerous battles to become more of an ease to combat. Or possibly even more vicious to combat should you lose at obtaining that advantage. It essentially balances the difficulty curve in a subtle but great way, and I love it. At number 3 worst, I-401 as LSC only. Knowing some of you guys, I'm sure there's an elusive ancillary reason you could pull out of some history article somewhere for why this makes a lick of sense. But for me, all I see is a submarine requiring a gluttonous amount of resources to acquire. A submarine. You know, the class of ship that's supposed to cost very little to use because it's basically a sniper meat shield. As if that makes any sense to begin with. Besides, with the level of rarity Shioi's card already is, wouldn't it be difficult enough just snagging her from normal construction? I know for a fact that the other submarines are already tricky enough, especially since Iku still remains a random node drop only. Why does there need to be this transparently forced extra layer of difficulty? I thought it was called large ship construction for a reason. Because let me tell you, I'm not paying that much for such a tiny under-equipped girl. At number 3 best, the marriage system being implemented. Probably the biggest no-brainer on this list. The marriage system not only cements the waifu theme of this entire game by allowing you to literally give a wedding ring to any girl you choose, but it's also actually surprisingly useful by boosting your chosen girl's HP and luck, and allows them to continually raise their natural stats, such as evasion, anti-sub, and line of sight, with every level, just as they normally had for the previous 99, up until a whopping 150. Sure, it'll take you ages to get there unless you're the most hardcore turbo nerd imaginable who lacks any other hobbies or a social life of any kind. But since I'd like to have faith that most of you aren't like that, I'll trust that's actually meant to be the point here, adding further longevity and purpose to your favorite girl's alien curb-stomping career. At number 2 worst, the entire Summer 2014 event. Here's where things start getting into the legitimately bad territory. Yes, there are a number of elements that have bugged me for a while about the past summer event, so I'm just lumping it all together into one number. First, I'm not so frustrated by the sheer difficulty of this event as I am the difficulty curve that it presented. I get that they wanted lower level admirals to have an easy time with the first 2 maps. But why did everyone above level 40 get absolute hell, while everyone below it got to ride on the wet banana? And then, it's E3 onward where it actually levels off and gets easier? And for what? How does Oyoto literally end up the most worthwhile prize of the entire event? And she's given on E2! I mean, I love Tokitsukaze, you guys know that. But she is not worth an E4. And don't even get me started on that clown Onryu! I'm sorry, I do kind of like you, but just... do your clothes just not even fit you right? And a blueprint for a level 50 Kai? Blow me! And then, as if that's not enough, to cap off this heinous event, the prize for the first ever E6, yeah, E6, as if this event couldn't be self-indulgent enough, is Isokaze. A Kagero-class destroyer. Not something cool or genuinely useful like Akizuki. A Kagero-class destroyer. If it weren't for the combined fleet mechanic actually being a clever idea, and the bosses being quite possibly the best Abyssal characters in the franchise up to this point, this would absolutely be the number 1 worst. Likely even the worst thing to come out of the game in its history. Conversely, at number 2 best, the Fall 2014 event. Everything the summer event got wrong, this event got completely right. The difficulty curve feels natural. The prize girls are some of the absolute best in the franchise, both as prizes and just as standalone characters for their usefulness and charm. I even really like Noaki, and she's just a Kagero-class destroyer too. Although, that might be partly because of this. There's my trophy! There's my trophy, bitch! but also because there isn't really any overindulgence here. The entire event just lasted up to E4 and that was it. Even the combined fleet mechanic, I thought, was better utilized here than in the summer event where it was introduced. Sadly though, and this is just my personal opinion of course, the bosses in this event were probably among the poorest I've yet seen. I don't know, I just really couldn't get into them, like, at all. The E2 boss resembled Harusame way too much to be clever, and the E4 boss... well, the less I say about those shoes, the better. So if anything, that's something the summer event certainly got right. These two events seem to have a little yin-yang thing going on here. But finally, at number 1 worst, fast battleships being able to use AP shells. Surprise! This one isn't even anger-inducing so much as it is just sad. Despite not being capable of an evasion bonus like their more nimble counterpart and generally costing more to use, there was a time when slow battleships made up for it by being able to exclusively equip AP shells, a piece of equipment that allows for a much greater chance of firing critical hits. Since this update, though, they've become a waste to use over the fast battleships. It pretty much breaks the game, not greatly, but I still heard a pretty nasty snap when it dropped. Got a map that requires a BB? No question, it's gonna be a fast battleship. They cost less, grant the whole team an evasion bonus if everybody else is fast, and yeah, that awesome crit bonus, put that on them too, for good measure if you've got it. Yamato and Musashi, while not cost-effective in the least, at least hold the mantle of having absurd HP, firepower, and range, but Nagato and Mutsu? Why would you ever think of putting them on your team now? Unless, you know, you actually like them, like me, and use them anyway because I'm hardcore and that's how I roll! When I'm not using Bismarck, that is. And that brings us to the number 1 best update of 2014. The first introduction of foreign ships on White Day. I am one predictable son of a gun, and I probably should never make a list video ever again if it can somehow include the Germans. But like Nazi propaganda, I'm just going to keep advertising how great they are. Can't stop me now! Even if you don't think the German ladies are as lovely as I do though, this marked a major turning point in the franchise. The introduction of ships that were wholly not Japanese proved fairly early on that there would be some worthwhile longevity to this franchise, even when all of the IJN's fleet is added to the game, which sadly has left a little more than destroyers remaining. There is still a future for those who stand by the game, because this proved that not only will there be Germans, but there will be potential for other countries' ships to become added to the fray beyond them. They'll keep getting churned out like Pokemon, I tell you. I can't say how long KanColle will keep up its popularity, and much more impossible is it for me to suggest when the game will finally have its plug be pulled. But let it be known, at this point, there are still many ships that await our attention, and as long as there are ships that can be turned into cute girls, there will be a Kantai Collection for us admirals to foster them. To be honest, it was actually quite difficult coming up with 5 legitimate things from this year to bash on the developers for. And on the other hand, there were a whole lot of great things introduced, or at the very least, additions I respected, like the blueprints, that upgraded the gameplay and replayability, which didn't have the space to be placed on this list, such as the many new Kainis, the debut of extra operation maps, and a whole new World 6 to explore. So with that said, what were among the updates that launched in 2014 that you consider the best or the worst? Make sure you post your answers in the comment section below this video. I'll be watching, so have a safe and prosperous 2015, fellow admirals. Keep your kanmusu close, and your enemy vessels closer, because this voyage of ours together has only just begun.